Hey, it's Chris. Two small box games. Yeah, am I zoomed in far enough? Yep, you know it. Let's go. What do you need to know? Two card-driven battlers. Pros, cons, are they right for you? Coming to crowdfunding. Let's do it. So what I've got going on here is I've got A.I.Pokalypse and I've got the Battlefruit Kingdom expansion from Mindbug. And so what are we talking about first? We're going to be talking about Battle Kingdom, Mindbug. What do you need to know? How familiar are you with one of the previous iterations, the two times they already came to crowdfunding in previous? Or is this your first time around hearing this one? Well, let's go, because the most important aspect of this, the most important thing that you need to know are the well-named cards for which the game is taking its main thematic and overall incorporation from, and these are the Mindbugs, right? This is a head-to-head dueler like any other. You got a deck of cards, you split it, you give some to each person, and you play until somebody loses all their life points, right? No big deal, no biggie, right? Nothing different there. Oh wait, but there is. So in case you're not familiar with this, I mean, this is a game where if everything is overpowered, nothing is overpowered. And so the dynamic is just very simple and straightforward, right? Play a card or attack with a card. That's all you get. You get one action per turn. What you do, though, how you do it is really the dynamic difference. And so if I could actually shuffle correctly here, the second time I film this, you'd see a little bit more of what you need to know. You just have sheer craziness with these cards, not only from an aesthetic naming aspect, but also a mechanical ability aspect, because basically all you're doing is looking at the attack power and then whatever crazy abilities or keywords they have at the bottom, because you're going to be provided with, when you play this game, these cards that are going to remind you, oh yeah, there's Fast, Frenzy, Furious, and Hunter, Poisonous, Sneaky, Tough. One of those is not like the others because I threw it in there because I was speaking fast and it's not actually a thing, and that's Furious. But the rest of them are all just, different terminology for things that you'd recognize. Fast, you can attack right away on the turn you play it. Frenzy, attack twice in a turn. Tough takes 2 hits or death, attacks to kill. Poisonous, anything that it's in contact with combat-wise dies. And the new one, Harvest, where you just throw little tokens onto the harvesters, and at the beginning of every turn, you take one off, and when it runs out, then the harvest ability activates. Now in this case, this one's super strong. It's got a couple abilities, so if you don't use it by the time it's out, you'll lose it. It kills itself. But there are other ones, like, oh, you have to lay 3 down here, and if you can keep it alive, you can kill everything on the other opponent's side of the board. But then you have the Pomazilla, you have the Pineapple Paladin, the Duradillo, which again, when defeated, loses a life. But look at all those keywords. Craziness, pure craziness. And so that's the dynamic of this game, right? You go back and you forth. And again, it seems relatively simplistic. It seems relatively straightforward. And we'll try shuffling one more time on the video to see if I can actually bridge it. And so all you do is you divide up the deck into 2. You go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10, 10. And these other 28 cards you just set aside. And you can use 3 of them on each side if you want, or you can use tokens, whatever you want to do to count life points, because all you have are 3 life points. And so you take your 10 cards, which, combination of this, which means you can't metagame, which means you can't figure out exactly who's got what, because there are a few duplicates, but not a ton. And you draw 5, and you play the tactical dynamic nature of this strategic game in a nutshell as a Red Arcana style. What do you got? How can I use what I got to whip you? And that's the dynamic and the awesome aspect of this game. Because it's strategic, because these Mindbugs that I mentioned, they're the best part. And I alluded to them. I hinted at them. But what do they actually do? Well, your opponent just played the most kick-butt, best card that you've ever seen in your life. Just kidding though, I'm going to flip over my Mindbug and steal it. That's all it is. You get 2 of them every single game. Choose wisely, as they say, right? The famous quote. But that's all you're doing, and then once you play a card, you draw back up. Run out of cards, well, that's your life point. You better hope that you utilize them successfully before you play all 10 of them, because otherwise you might be, well, up a creek, as they say as well. So that is the dynamic of how you're going to be utilizing these. It's heavy, heavy tactically based, because your plan based on your hand might be completely different depending on when someone steals your card, or the fact that, they just played a kick butt combo that's going to rock you if you don't change your pace, Amadeus. So that is what you're doing. And the best part about this is it's, as a controlled agent of chaos, neutrality style me, it gives you both a little bit of control, it gives you a little bit of chaos, and it ultimately is also most rewarding because the better player is going to win. Whoever played the better game is going to win. And because everything, again, like I said, is overpowered, nothing is overpowered. So it doesn't matter that you got these overpowered cards. It doesn't matter that you bought all of your cards online as a TCG style and it's pay to win. Nope, nope, you can't do it here. It's just, how do you make kiwi salad out of kiwis, right? Banana cream pie out of bananas. So that's what you've got going on. And then you just play it in less than 10 minutes. And you know what? You lost. You're so sad. Too bad. Well, play it again. Play it in 3 times in half an hour. And again, I guarantee this is also one of these small card games. You're going to play it multiple times in a row too. Because that's also what you want, right? You want the feeling of, whoa, let's play that again. And truth be told, you know, when I played this first time, and not this, when I played Mindbug the first time, I'm not one of those diehards, right? Like, I'm not one of these, oh, this game was awesome forever. I was not a big fan of this game the first couple times I played it. I played this game and I said, this is what? But the growth happens when you realize how freaking important these mind bugs actually are. Until you realize what the value is of these from an overall strategic standpoint, this game is going to go fall flat for you. If you can't utilize them properly, if you don't know what you're doing, if you ignore them, you will lose and you will play poorly and you will feel bad and you will not like this game. But this game has grown on me with more repeated plays. Now, is this my favorite deck? I don't really know. I want to see what they have in the other deck too. But any of them, you can mix, match, create your own, however you want. You know, this expansion, this crowdfunding campaign's coming with 2 of them. And supposedly a 4-player mode. Not sure how I feel about the 4-player mode. I can't test it. I don't have the rules. I can't talk to you about that. But if you're like me and you like this, you play 2-player head-to-head as the majority. And that's where they really, you know, maximize the fun factor, if you will. Like, don't get me wrong. I like Dice Throne at a 3- and 4-player count, but I love it at a 2-player count. So if you can duplicate that, that's the most successful model I've seen. And so I would hope that there's heavy inspiration from that aspect of things. Just because, again, it's like Dice Throne only shorter with cards. Cards only. How does that make you feel, right? Them some pedigrees, them some words. So that's why I love Mindbug, and it has a high recommendation for me, if you're anything like me, that is. So if you're not like me, if you don't like dealing with what you've got, if you like pre-planning all of your strategy out, if you're a Euro optimizer, this game is going to be a complete and utter miss. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what those 10 cards are. You only have 10 cards. You don't know what order to play them. You don't know how your opponent's going to react. You don't know when they're going to steal or when they're not going to steal. Are you going to tempt them to steal? Are you going to, misinform them in terms of faking them out and hope that they steal the wrong card so that you can utilize the best one that you're saving for next, or not? Because that's the dynamic. Because once you steal a card in the other person's turn. So then once you steal that card, it's actually your turn again. Well, not really again, but it's your turn then. So you can potentially double whammy. When are you double whammying? No whammy, no whammy, no whammy, no whammy, whammy, stop! Is what you're playing. And that's freaking awesome. If you know that reference, hit me up in the comment section down below. So next up, we have A.I.Pokalypse here. This is going to be more divisive because it's doing stuff a little bit differently. It's got the auto battler style of things, which will mean something to you in a second, and I'll explain what that exactly is. But the essential gist is you have 3 main types of your cards. The thing you can't see here on the back of these cards is these are actually the strength of these cards in the first place. The strength of these cards is illustrated by the numbers on the back of them that are corresponding to the slots that you can put them in order to battle in the second phase. The first phase is recruitment. We'll talk about it in a second. The reds are upgraded. And now all of these, including the ammo here, are utilizable in 2 different ways. You can see the ammo is actually upgrading the strength of a unit by 1 permanently or 2 during a battle. And the other tricky part is you flip these over and they're all dual use. The regular recruitments, you can see here, color-coded as well as numerically coded with an ability, which is going to be symbolically represented by certain phases of the game. And then you also have the upgrades, which do not have numbers, cannot be triplicated out. We'll talk about that later, but then also have a little bit better ability overall. And what you do essentially on your turn is you have a set number of cards in your hand. And we'll talk about the ammo in a second. You take the number of cards in your hand and you decide how are you going to use these cards. One of 2 manners. One, you decide to place one face down as a slot where you can then recruit somebody else on top of it. And here is the tricky point. Those red ones I mentioned, they're actually also your life points because you start out with 6 of them. As you take damage, you get to flip them face up and they become part of your potential recruitment when you decide to go triplicate, because that triplicate thing refers to me taking cards and having cards of the same color and the same number here and having 3 of them that I can discard all at once in order to summon a stronger one, if you will. And that's how you do it. But you can only summon one that you've taken damage and put into your available pool, or you take the risk, one in the hand versus two in the bush. Grabbing the top two of the ones that you haven't taken damage from yet, flipping them up and choosing one that way instead. Again, not knowing what they are because you randomly assigned a number of them at the beginning of the game. And so again, high risk, high reward. How do you feel about that? These abilities are stronger, but you can also spend your cards in a different way in order to get them as a red slot ability-wise there as well, which are going to give you unlocks as you increase the strength. Now, I mentioned the strength. The ammo cards are one of the main ways that you're going to be doing that because you're going to be acquiring these cards and be able to store them for use as a one-time discard, increase his power all of a sudden to a 2, to a 3, to a 4, whatever it may be, and just sliding it up that way, or the battle, which is the second phase. But on the opposite side, this is where the other asymmetry comes in, is on the opposite side, you have faction bases, essentially. And at the beginning of the game, you draw two of these, and you just choose one of them to start out as your individual power. And so that you can see a lot of variety with a little bit of card there. And so there you go. And the artwork on this is kind of cool. So that's what you're getting with this, and you can only store a certain number of these up at any time. The second phase is going to be a little bit more divisive, and it's going to be the big pro or con, make it or break it for you as a whole. Because now, the ammos aside, we'll talk about that later, how that interacts in this phase of things, is you have your characters sitting out here in their various slots. Then everybody looks around and says, who has the most characters? Oh, Chris, you have 3. So you draw 3 cards from the top of that stack. And one by one, you simultaneously, each person flips it over and says, not that way, says, okay, this is blue. This is my blue card battle this time. Do I have one that's blue in front of me? No, no, yes. And then you sum up this number plus whatever the strength is down here at the bottom of the card, and that's the number for my battle. And then you go against whatever other people flipped up. So someone else in a different pile may have actually flipped up one of these, or they could have flipped up a green one. But so you're not necessarily going blue against blue. If I play a blue card, I have to draw my blue pile as my attacker. Now I don't have to necessarily. If someone else had, say, 4 or 5 slots, I could, slot it over here in case this was only a 1 and I didn't want to use that. And you can mitigate it. Say if I had another 3 in my hand, or if I had something stronger than it, I could put it down there in place of it. But otherwise, it's just a random flip. And so herein lies the big dilemma, is that these cards work synergistically. So the human cards, the blue ones, get more bonuses from the blue ones. The red ones get more bonuses from other reds. The green ones get more bonuses from the other greens. So if you have more of them, the effects are better. The combos, the engines are better. But if you're randomly drawing and allocated from this deck, and you don't have the main color that you're majority of down here, well, you just have to take this as your battle value, which means you may have 4 different battles here. But if these are all, for example, green, and I pull anything but green here as my card, well, I can't use any of these in the battle. And so then I just have to take this value, which is only then a 2, which means if anybody else pulls anything more than a 2 total, I lose. Now, again, here's the tricky point. You don't lose. You sum up how many battles you win at the end of the battle phase round, so of the 4 potentially of this one, and then you take the difference between the highest person, the person who won the most, and what you won. So if you're only playing with 2 people and they won all 4 and you won 0, you can't have ties, so it could be 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, 4-4 even. But let's say you're playing with 5 people and someone won 3 and you only won 1, you take 2 damage. Those 2 damage come from your pool here that I mentioned earlier. You flip 2 of these face up, you have a number face down left. Here's the other tricky point, is when somebody runs out, this is going to be another big make it or break it. It's sort of a catch-all, catch up the leader sort of situation mechanic as a whole. But again, just like with the random flipping from this deck, I can see it being very divisive, is that you go to sudden death. What that means is after you've figured out that damage, everyone goes to the level playing field that's left, and you take 1 damage and you're out going forward. So it prevents a stalled game. It prevents turtling. It prevents the engine from just overflowing, because the other thing I didn't mention is you can only have 6 of these slots. And so once you potentially upgrade your characters with the upgrades here and slot them here, but maybe I don't like this one, so now I'm going to get rid of this one altogether and play one of my super ones here instead and utilize that. You can only have 6, so you're going to be mixing and matching and managing that way. But the sudden death almost can feel a little anticlimactic at the same time. It prevents the game from overstaying its welcome by far, but it's also going to lead you to a little bit of the best player may not always win. The luckiest in the last round may win if you make it to that far. And that's a tricky dynamic, because do you like that much chaos, right? I love chaos, but is that almost a little too much? Because at the end there, you're not necessarily being rewarded for playing the best. You're playing the best up until that point. And that's the tricky dynamic. The cards, there's tons of combos. You're going to be overwhelmed too if you're not looking for just the sheer number of possibilities of combos of different, actions at the bottoms of these cards and how they can be utilized. And again, some of the errata is probably a little bit needing to be fine-tuned in terms of how the aliens and the rogues are interacting. And I think that's just a rulebook issue of when you can play some, because the aliens, again, change the dynamic as a whole, because you can't even play this one until sudden death. But it starts with increased strength, and it triggers the A.I.Pokalypse, which again is a whole nother endgame situation as a whole. So it changes the dynamics, but it's going to be overwhelming because you're just not going to have a clue how these are going to interact and the combos you can make, or the combos that are even possible, or the upgrade combinations that are possible as a whole when you start throwing some of these under other ones and seeing which ones then go during the battle and which ones go when they're played and which ones go at the beginning of the round. So there's going to be a lot of upkeep that you're going to have to do as you're going across. And so that combination of things is going to be a little bit overwhelming if you're not knowing what you're getting into in the first place. And how clever can you be? Because it definitely allows you plenty of wiggle room to be clever. But as a whole, there's a ton going on, deceptively so much. And then ultimately, sometimes, I've got a red and 3 green here, and I pull, one that's not one of those. I pull, a blue card, and I say, well, I have to utilize this blue card and exhaust one of these piles. Am I going to choose the right one? And if I choose my red one, okay, well, great. If I choose my green one, that's a little stronger. How are you going to utilize whichever one it's going to be, especially if you have multiple colors that you can't fully utilize? Because maybe now I pull another blue, and maybe now I pull a third blue. And so now do I have the red one or the green one remaining? And because I don't know what that last card is, because I can't see it, and you know what? Oh, it was a red one. So is that going to frustrate you? It's a little bit longer, but it prevents that, overstaying potentially as well with some of the mechanics. And so it's an interesting aspect that you just do the simultaneous reveal, allocate as the battle. Now, the mitigation, like I said, is the strongest suit. If you have one that's better that you want to play from your hand, that's where keeping the cards in your hand is really going to benefit you. But if you keep the cards in your hand, you're not going to have them down here in the first place. So how do you deal with that dynamic element? And the ammo cards which you're acquiring, as I mentioned, you play these during that phase 2 and increases the power of any of those stacks by 2. Allowing you to overcome. So a lot of ways of changing things, but is it going to be enough mitigation for you? And that's the question you have to answer yourself. So there you go. That is A.I.Pokalypse and Mindbug, all in a nutshell. It's a lot of game. Small boxes. Wasn't kidding. A lot of strategy. Doesn't need a thick rulebook, folks. Remember that. Go support your favorite indie publishers. They sent them so I could talk to you about them. Have a great freaking day. Subscribe if you made it this far. Peace out!